Good afternoon. My name is Keith Dutton, and I'm with Silverado Memory Care Communities, the recognized world leader in the care of those with neurodegenerative disorders and memory impairing diseases. I want to thank the Northwest Parkinson's Foundation for allowing me to be a part of this very important HOPE conference. And I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. And as most of us, I'm sure, have experienced throughout this pandemic, it's a little bit different. Speaking to a wonderful group like this today, where you are basically speaking to a screen and not able to see everybody's faces. But we're going to do the best that we can here and talk to you today a little bit about emerging technologies and the potential benefits for Parkinson's patients. Now, before we start, I want to just throw out a few disclaimers. I am not a medical professional. My background is in technology and in senior living. Caring for and serving our aging population. I mentor a number of emerging tech companies. I've served as a judge on various panels that have evaluated emerging technologies that are focused on improving the lives of our seniors. And I'm basically a tech geek. I've spent the last 14 years caring for seniors, including those who are afflicted with Parkinson's. Any information that I present today, if you feel like you want to explore it further, either for yourself or for a loved one, I would strongly encourage you to consult with your physician or other healthcare providers to see if your specific circumstances would benefit from what is being shared in this presentation today. Now, my goal today is to discuss some innovative technologies that are or have the potential to have a positive impact on the lives of those who live with Parkinson's. There's many avenues that I could explore, and certainly I could spend hours on this topic. It's one that I'm very passionate about. For our purposes today, I want to focus on three specific areas. That would be wearable technology, smartphones, and spatial computing. But before we dive into those three areas, let's spend a little bit of time talking about what is an emerging technology and why is it important? Why are we talking about this today? Well, first of all, an emerging technology is a new or existing technology whose development, practical applications, or both are still largely unrealized. Now, typically there include innovations that represent progressive developments in the monitoring, treatment, or management of Parkinson's. And more, we see that this is being viewed, the idea of different emerging technologies and how they can impact those with Parkinson's. We see that this is being viewed as a very important arena in the fight to diagnose and treat Parkinson's. So much so that in 2018, the theme of the International Congress of Parkinson's Disease and Movement Disorders, that theme was technology in the diagnosis, monitoring, and management of movement disorders. That was their theme in 2018. Now, we know that each year more than 60,000 Americans are diagnosed with Parkinson's. And Parkinson's impacts more than 10 million people worldwide. So now more than ever, it's important that we support and pursue the research that we need to do to come up for a solution to this very horrible disease. Researchers know that one major hurdle in their work is collecting accurate reporting by research participants. And that's traditionally relied heavily on self-reporting diaries as the primary tool. Well, a large industry and academia collaboration, including Harvard Medical School, the Spaulding Rehabilitation Network, Boston University School of Medicine, Pfizer, Tufts Medical Center, and the Wyss Institute for Biologically Inspired Engineering at Harvard University, they found that 38% of the participants in those traditional types of research, when they were asked to complete a diary at home, they missed nearly 25% of total possible entries. And otherwise, they made entries with an average delay of more than 4 hours. So it wasn't even real-time recollection. Now, again, it's important that we collect data and we collect it accurately. Digital measurement tools, including mobile and wearable technologies, are widely recognized for their potential to improve the resolution and efficacy of remote monitoring of people with Parkinson's. Now, we are seeing more and more as each year passes that there is greater activity and effort put into researching technology and how it could impact and benefit lives of those with Parkinson's. And one of the ways that we've been able to tell that is by the number of articles that are being published in scientific journals. A study by Ranadeep Deb and colleagues showed that the number of published papers every year has increased at a constant rate from 2008 through 2015. And while the rate of increase has significantly grown from 2016 to 2019, the majority of the papers, 62%, were published in the last 4 years alone. And 21% of all papers published going all the way back to 2008 were published in 2019, which is the most recent year that they were able to collect data for. So again, what we're seeing is there is greater and greater effort, research, work being done on technology and how it can impact those with Parkinson's. So I also want to spend just a little bit of time, again, before we do a deeper dive, onto what is driving a lot of the technologies, right? What's the purpose? What is it that we're trying to do? Well, what we're trying to do is we're trying to collect data. Data is king. Data is worth more than gold in today's world. Now, data collection in this arena is very important because it allows us to analyze trends in order to create predictions. Now, it's also important because it allows us to feed that data into algorithms. And algorithms are simply historical math, right? It's a way for us to analyze the data that's been collected to come up with some kind of answer, some kind of solution, some type of interpretation of that data. And the algorithms, which you'll hear about quite a bit as I continue to do this presentation, play a very critical role in these various technologies that we're looking at today. Now, data has rapidly transformed most industries. Everybody on this presentation has heard of most of these companies: Tesla, Uber, Facebook, Amazon, Netflix. And as it applies in those arenas, it will to medicine, and the same will be true here. In other words, just as data has been a transformative influence in the growth of those industries, it will be here in medicine, especially medical research as it applies to Parkinson's. Now, there's generally two types of data that is collected. There's passive data and there's active data. Passive data is data that is basically the user doesn't have to do a thing. The data is being collected by some device. The person's just living their normal day-to-day life, and data is being collected. Now, there's other data, active data, where the participant actually has to perform tasks, do particular motions, movements, certain actions they have to take in order for the data to be collected. They're aware that they're in the process of collecting data. And again, it's really, really important to know that data is driving a lot of these technologies that we're talking about today. Now, as I mentioned, one of the three areas that I want to focus on is wearable technology. And on your screen now, you'll see an Apple Watch, probably the most symbolic item in existence today when we talk about wearable technology. And these Apple Watches are amazing. They can act as a fitness tracker. They can remind you to take your medications. They will detect falls. And I'm going to just pause for a moment. I recently experienced this myself. Just last fall, I was out riding my bike. I was run over by a driver. I got ejected from my bike. I flew through the air and I landed against a building. My Apple Watch realized what was going on, and I got a message exactly like what you're seeing on your screen here right now. It said, "Hey, you've had a fall, Key. You want us to call 911? And it did. My Apple Watch called 911, let them know where I was, and that was one of the ways, or one of the reasons why help got to me as quickly as it did. Now, these types of devices, when loaded with the proper software, can also detect or become tremor monitors. They can gauge dyskinesia, and also they are very important in something called closed loop therapy, which I'll get into in just a moment. Wearable technology refers to numerous methods by which movement information is captured on a continuous basis using various sensors worn by a patient. So we're capturing data. And these Apple Watches, for example, have multiple sensors built into them. Now, it typically consists of various combinations of what we call accelerometers and gyrometers. Now, what are those, right? Well, accelerometer is an electronic device that measures the magnitude and direction of the change in the rate of an object's speed. In other words, it's just gauging speed, right? How fast, how slow is something going? Is it moving or not? A gyrometer is an electronic device that measures the rate and angle of an object's rotation. So which direction are you going in? Are you angled? And these two components, the accelerometer and the gyroscope, they give an objective assessment. So we were talking earlier about somebody keeping track in a journal where the human element is involved and they're going to think about what they're putting down. Well, there's no human element here. You basically have objective assessments of data. It's just collecting data. It's not biased, and it allows us to do something with that raw data. Now, as we talk about these various wearable technologies that I'm going to talk about here in just a little bit, the biggest difference in them are the algorithms. There's that word again, the algorithms that are used to interpret the data that's collected. And in other words, you can collect data and different algorithms can basically strip away different components of that data to tell you a different story that might be relevant to the research that you're trying to do or the specific outcome that you're trying to get through the collection of that data. Now, one of the most prevalent complications when it comes to Parkinson's patients is something known as the medication on and off motor fluctuations. And this is something that, for those of you who may not be familiar with it, is just something that triggers inside the brain whether or not a medication is working or not. Again, it's like this on-off switch in the brain. And what we see is that within the first 3 to 5 years of diagnosis, we see about 50% of patients are suffering from these on and off fluctuations in their brain and how it's processing and responding to the medications. And usually within 10 years, we see 80% of Parkinson's patients diagnosed with these on-off motor fluctuations. The onset of these motor fluctuations is a critical point in managing the disease because it requires ongoing adjustments in treatment, such as changing the frequency and dosage of medication or changing the parameters for deep brain stimulation. So keep that in mind, and we're going to come back to that in just a moment and tie in what I just referred to earlier about closed loop therapy. I want to first take a moment to talk to you about a company or a product called REMPark. Now, REMPark was something that came out of a study done by the European Union. It was funded by the European Union between 2011 and 2015. Now, REMPark was when some of this technology was very, very early on, very, very new. There was a prototype version of a wearable device, and it aimed to improve the monitoring of Parkinson's on-off states. And it consisted of a sensor worn in a belt and a smartphone app that would work to record the movement of the person with Parkinson's, and it would provide cues to improve walking, as well as nudges to fill out questionnaires on non-motor symptoms. So it was still just cueing the person to still write in their diary. Now, in a multi-center 5-day validation study, REMPark was found to correctly detect on-off states in patients, comparing the data from the sensor with their patient's own reported on-off states, okay? Now, fast forward, this study ended in 2015. By 2019, the technology had progressed so much that now they were able to utilize closed loop therapy. How do they do that? Well, closed loop therapy is therapy where you have data that is being collected by some device, and that data immediately goes to another device that can provide therapy right in that moment. So an example of that is deep brain stimulation, right? Deep brain stimulation, a person who has a deep brain stimulative device, that device could be connected to an Apple Watch like what you see here, and data that is being collected by that watch will let that deep brain stimulation know whether or not where you're at with the monitoring of that on-off state that we were talking about just a little while ago, and it will immediately kick in the deep brain stimulation to help manage the on-off states that we were just talking about. So it's real time. That's what we're talking about by closed loop therapy. Now, why do we use wearable tech? Why use it? What's the benefits? Now, we'll do a deep dive in these in just a little bit, but let's just first go through them. First of all, we use wearable technologies because we want to improve the diagnosis of Parkinson's. We want to improve the monitoring of those afflicted with Parkinson's. We want to encourage increased activity, or we want to track compliance. We also want to improve clinical trial data. So again, what does that mean? Well, first of all, going back to the improving the diagnosis, we currently, when we diagnose via clinical exams, right? That's how we've traditionally done it. You've got to go in, have a clinical exam, and that's how you're diagnosed. Wearable technologies, using the data from the algorithms that we keep talking about, they allow for more clear diagnoses. It's another objective tool that clinicians can utilize. Now, when we talk about improving the monitoring of Parkinson's, we know that patients tend to see their doctors for relatively brief periods. Excuse me. And currently, doctors adjust medication doses primarily based on patient and care partner anecdotal reports. So the more information about how a patient is actually doing at home in the form of reliable information gleaned from a wearable sensor may allow for more accurate medication adjustments. That's just one example. Again, encouraging increased activity or tracking compliance, that speaks for itself. It was that we talked about it just a little while ago about how it can nudge a particular behavior. It can act as a reminder. And finally, when we talk about improving clinical trial data, what we're saying is that again, currently the way that clinical trials determine whether a medication is helpful is by performing rating scales at various points. Wearable data does a better job of providing objective, accurate feedback. Moreover, patients tend to perform well for their physicians. We all know we want to do our best when we're sitting there in front of our doctor, but we may not be doing the same when we're at home and nobody's watching. Trials sometimes ask patients to keep diaries at home to gather more information. However, these can also be inaccurate. We talked about that a little earlier, as one of the studies had suggested. So supplementing the current rating scales and patient diaries with data that is gleaned from a wearable sensor could help determine whether a clinical trial medication is helping or not. This effort explains why pharmaceutical companies are very interested in wearables, and some are working to develop their own devices. And in fact, we're going to see an example of that in here in just a little bit. Now, what are some examples? What are some wearable tech examples that we can talk about today? Excuse me. One is something known as PKG, a personal kinetograph. Now, this is an it was FDA cleared, and it's been available on the market for monitoring of patients in between office visits. A patient wears a watch-like sensor for 6 to 7 days in anticipation of an office visit. The sensor collects the data, which is then interpreted through the PKG algorithms to measure things like bradykinesia and dyskinesia throughout the time period that the watch is worn. The PKG also has the ability to alert a patient to take a medication dose, and it allows the patient to record whether that dose was taken. After the data is collected, the patient mails the watch in, and the data is downloaded and sent to the patient's doctor so that the physician has the information for the patient visit. This information can then complement what the patient and care partner say about their medication responses at home. Let's talk about Blue Sky. Now, Blue Sky was a collaborative effort between the pharmaceutical industry, in this case Pfizer, and the software industry, IBM, to collect and analyze large amounts of data from many patients using wearable technologies at home, in a simulated home, and in the lab, along with clinical rating scales and patient diaries. This is something that is still in development. Emma's Watch. Emma's Watch in 2017, a Microsoft prototype of a watch was revealed, and it used vibrating motors to dampen tremors. The device was known as Emma's Watch, named after Emma Lawton, a British graphic designer with young onset Parkinson's disease. And she was the inspiration and the first user of this invention. And it dramatically improved her writing. Now, again, this is something that is still in development. It's progressed quite a bit. But again, the early research that was done back in 2017 and 2018 was very, very promising. Now, there's also some research that's been done at Florida Atlantic University. Researchers from Florida Atlantic University's College of Engineering and Computer Sciences developed an innovative way to automatically and reliably detect and monitor that medication on and off states in Parkinson's patients. So again, we're talking about that medication on off state. They combined an algorithm and sensor-based system that detects on-off state patterns in Parkinson's patients using 2 wearable motion sensors placed on the patient's most affected wrist and their most affected ankle. For the study, which was published in the Journal of Medical Engineering and Physics, these sensors collected movement signals while patients performed 7 daily living activities, such as walking, getting dressed, in there, and it tracked these in their medication on and off phases. The algorithm was trained using approximately 15% of the data from 4 activities, and then it was tested on the remaining data. Data from the 2 sensors provided objective measures instead of a patient diary or self-report. The results of the study revealed that the algorithm was able to detect the response to medication during the subject's daily routine activities with an average of 90.5% accuracy, 94.2% sensitivity, and 85.4% specificity. So again, very, very promising results from basically what was wearable technology. So we're going to talk a little bit here about smartphones. And before we do, I want to share a particular video for us to watch. And so let's go ahead and watch this video.
The focus was on keeping things simple for our trial participants. So we designed a custom app asking patients to complete 6 active tests and passive monitoring on a daily basis wherever they are. The voice test is first. Here you need to take a deep breath and make a steady single ah sound for as long as possible into the mic. This allows us to pick the tremor in the voice. Next is the balance test, where you stand still for 30 seconds. This is evaluated using data from the smartphone's accelerometer, gyroscope, and magnetometer. Then comes the gait test, asking you to walk for 20 yards. Using the same sensors, we can evaluate walking patterns. The 4th test is the Dexterity Test. Place the smartphone on a table and tap at a regular pace using the index and middle finger. The last 2 tests focus on tremor. The rest tremor test, you need to lay the same hand in your lap and count down from 100. Lastly, the Postural tremor test asks you to hold the smartphone in your outstretched hand. Again, we make use of all relevant sensors. After completing the active tests, patients will then pop the phone in their pockets and carry it around with them throughout the day.
Smartphones have revolutionized our lives. Almost everybody has one. And as you can see by the picture here on your screen, the picture with the guy there, all those devices, what we carry now in our back pockets has replaced all of those devices and then more, and then some. What you don't see on there are books and dictionaries and encyclopedias. You know, again, our smartphones have replaced so much. You know, but when it comes to devices that we utilize for the treatment or study of Parkinson's, such as cueing devices, audio recordings, video recordings, force and pressure readings, our smartphones have even replaced those items. The video that you just saw was a smartphone-based system developed by a pharmaceutical company, Roche, and they demonstrated that information gleaned from their algorithm correlated with traditional scales and testing that are performed at movement disorder clinical visits and in clinical trials. So basically, the device that you carry in your pocket can replicate what is being done in movement disorder clinics and in clinical trials. Again, it may not be a complete substitute, but what an amazing tool to be able to carry in our pockets. More researchers are trying to use the sensors present on board a smartphone. Things like accelerometers, gyroscopes, magnetometers, GPSs for different analyses. Smartphone applications are also used to record the patient's mood, emotions, and even to record the dosage of medicines. Additionally, the screen of the smartphone can be used to record handwriting, the microphone to record speech samples, and the camera to record patient movements. And we'll get into that in just a little bit. I want to talk about spatial computing because some of what we just talked about regarding the smartphones also touches on here as well. I wanted to talk a little bit about spatial computing, and before we do that, let's take a look at this video.
Sandy Williams is buckled up and ready for action. It looks and feels like she's part of a video game, but it's actually high-tech rehab for her Parkinson's disease.
We know in neurorehabilitation, you have to challenge patients for them to get better. And so this provides a very safe environment for that to occur.
The virtual reality treadmill has 2 belts, one for each foot, and a base that moves to mimic different surfaces. It can also react and adjust to a patient's movement, and a wraparound video screen completely immerses the patient into a real-life scenario.
When I go over like a little hill, you feel it in the machine.
Rather than just having the patient walk or an individual walk up and down a standard biomechanical track, now what we can do is we can change the environment in a very dynamic fashion.
Special programs are designed to work on specific skill sets while providing positive feedback. During weekly appointments at Cleveland Clinic, Sandy works with her therapist on gait and increasing stride length by touching her toe to a box. Other times, she's asked to target birds and butterflies while walking. This helps with balance, and it satisfies that competitive spirit.
I enjoy doing the birds and the butterflies and swatting them down and killing them. Not that I enjoy the killing part, but I do enjoy the challenge of, can I get them? I know once I slow down, it could come to the point where I couldn't move. So I'm willing to do whatever I can to keep myself going.
At Cleveland Clinic, I'm Erica Foreman.
So spatial computing, augmented reality, virtual reality, right? Spatial computing is the practice of using physical actions, head and body movements, gestures, speech, as inputs for interactive digital media systems. So what is the difference between virtual reality and augmented reality? Let's first start there. Virtual reality, as you can see by the picture on the left, it's an immersive technology. Virtual reality replaces your vision. It brings you into another world entirely. Augmented reality adds to your world. It mixes digital content into your world. So when you look at the picture on the right, you're seeing a room, but then you're seeing that little robot in the middle of the room. So what are, again, what are some of the benefits of these and what do we use them for? First of all, virtual reality environments can be manipulated in ways that are not possible or safe in the real world, with the potential to improve assessment and training of multisensory motor cognitive integration. It enables repetitive practice of motor tasks, and it stimulates both motor and cognitive processes simultaneously. So again, we'll talk about that a little bit more in just a moment. Virtual reality offers patients with neurological deficits, such as Parkinson's, an opportunity to develop new motor strategies or to relearn motor abilities that were lost due to their injury or disease processes. Virtual reality offers patients with neurological deficits, such as Parkinson's, an opportunity to develop those strategies in a way that, as I said earlier, is a much more safer environment. Now, what are the benefits of virtual reality? Well, first of all, it enhances motivation and repetition. It provides precise feedback. It has transferability, and it also offers early stage learning. So in the environment of enhanced motivation and repetition, what we know is that to learn a motor skill, patients require sufficient motivation to drive their repetitive practice of a skill. So virtual reality may be a novel technology to most people, and with the variations in environment and tasks possible with simulated virtual environments, the patients are less likely to experience boredom. They can tolerate the extensive practice period by the variety provided by the video games, for example, like what you just saw in that video. Now, we also said that virtual reality provides precise feedback. And what we mean there is that there is extensive evidence that the proprioceptive and extrareceptive feedback can induce profound cortical and subcortical changes associated with motor performance. So with the use of virtual reality, the feedback is augmented through different settings. And this can tailor and further enhance the physiological changes in the patients with Parkinson's. When we talk about transferability, what we're saying is that one may be concerned that the motor skills learned from virtual reality may not translate to real-world environments. However, there is a fair amount of evidence that suggests that patients have the ability to not only learn motor skills, but also translate them to the real world. Sometimes we have seen, and studies have shown, that as long as 4 to 6 weeks after the completion of the virtual reality intervention, those benefits still remain in those afflicted with Parkinson's. And finally, early stage learning. Patients with severe Parkinson's may have problems learning a new motor skill, especially when it comes to the performance of complex motor skills. With virtual reality, patients can benefit from simplifying the task to its key components. In contrast, in a real-world environment, there are many distractions that could occur and may slow down the learning as the patients attempt to distinguish, excuse me, the key aspects of the task. Patients also reported enhanced quality of life and fewer falls and near falls. Now, what are the benefits of augmented reality? First of all, in augmented reality, we can create objects that are visible through a phone, like you see in the picture there, or wearable goggles. It also allows us to develop better movement. Now, let me give you an example. What you see on the phone there in this picture is bioengineering students at Rice University developed a smartphone app that helps people with Parkinson's disease improve their walking gait. Now, these patients are combating a common phenomenon known as freezing, in which the legs take random pauses contrary to how the brain wishes them to move. Now, because previous studies demonstrated that regular repeating sounds and visual cues can help patients develop a more regular stride, the Rice students decided to try to optimize this mechanism with a bit of technology. The application that's on this phone uses augmented reality to create objects, excuse me, near the floor that are visible through the phone. The user steps through these virtual objects that appear regularly in front of their feet, which will hopefully help to develop a more natural walking style. Now, there are also audio tones that could be activated that are designed to get a rhythm going. So that's just one way that augmented reality can benefit those that are afflicted with Parkinson's. Now, what are other benefits of augmented reality? Well, number one, they're built into everyday devices. And again, I'll come back to that. Well, in fact, let's start there. There is augmented reality built into our iPhones and iPads. Now, before, let's say you wanted to go and have your gait checked. You would have to put on a Speedo, you'd have tons of sensors strapped to your body, you'd have to walk around and they try to capture this data. Now, we can capture your gait and tons of other data just by using the augmented reality that's built into your devices like your iPhone or iPad. You simply turn on the camera, you use the appropriate app, it just records you walking across the room, and the sensors that are built into the augmented reality that's in, and the algorithms inside this iPhone or iPad are going to go ahead and capture the same information about your gait and other data that we would have done before, again, in those Speedos and on those sensors. Now, motor task and cognitive information are tracked simultaneously. You know, motor task is what we're doing. Motor task is something like walking. But then nobody just walks. There's usually other stimuli around us, and our brains are processing cognitive information. Like if we're walking on the street, could be a car that's walking by or honking its horn. And so what we do is, in a safe environment, we can use those accelerometers and gyroscopes that are built in that we talked about to give an objective assessment in the moment. And what we can do is we can replicate the situations like the walking with the car driving past honking its horn. And we can use the AR to do that in a safe environment and quantify the performance, quantify the impact on the person with Parkinson's. So for example, I've seen examples of somebody who is simulating walking through a grocery store, and all of a sudden something pops up on their right side vision, like a particular cereal that they want to get. And they're going to go over and they're going to reach for that cereal. And the whole time that they're doing that, their movement, their gait, the speed of their movement is all being tracked to see how they're doing, their response times, their gait, their stride. All of this is done simply by utilizing an iPhone and an iPad that just has a specific app that's loaded on it. And that app has the algorithms that we need to take the data that's being collected through the camera of that device and interpret it. Now, there's other benefits, virtual visits. Now, through the pandemic, I'm sure many of us have either seen, heard of, or experienced telemedicine, right? Where we're getting on a camera and we're talking to our doctors, letting them know what's going on. And it's a socially safe and socially distanced and safe way to do a doctor's visit. Well, AR is going to take it to that next level, because augmented reality is not just through, let's say, phones. It also could be through particular goggles. One of the most popular ones is Microsoft's Hololens. You can basically put this goggle on. Maybe the doctor wants to look at your hands. You will hold your hands out in front of you. You look down. The augmented reality overlays certain lines and measuring items and data collection items on your hands. And the doctor is able to look through that lens, look at your hands, look at your tremors, capture data. And so now your virtual visits take on a whole new dimension, because the doctor is able to capture data in that moment during the visit using augmented reality that's either built into your device or built into goggles or glasses that you might be wearing. And then finally, I want to talk a little bit about a very cool augmented reality game that was called Overcome. Now, Overcome is part of a National Institutes of Health funded project led by James Finley, a professor of biomedical engineering and director of the Locomotor Control Lab at USC. The project aims to develop virtual reality and augmented reality as a way to increase physical training and improve a patient's engagement and rehabilitation. So according to Finley, virtual reality offers patients a graded exposure to obstacles and an engaging approach to physical therapy while tracking their progress. So to help train cognition and memory, players are also asked to use controllers to categorize trash items according to whether they are recyclable or not. 2 trackers are placed on the feet to detect leg movement. The headset is also used to detect impending collisions. And when coming into contact with an obstacle, players receive a vibration, a haptic feedback that warns them to change their path. They get on these omnidirectional treadmills, which basically means the treadmill, unlike traditional treadmills that just go forwards, you can move in any different direction and the treadmill will move with you. And we can evaluate motor and non-motor functions using activities of daily living to, again, capture the data that we need and increase physical training and improve the engagement of that Parkinson's patient in their rehabilitation. Now, we've talked a little bit about wearable technology, smartphones, and virtual reality, augmented reality, which can fall under the umbrella of spatial computing. And these technologies are phenomenal, right? They're going to be changing the way that we live. They're certainly going to be changing the lives for the better of folks who are afflicted with Parkinson's. But, you know, not everything is, you know, just because it's technology doesn't mean that everything is just hunky-dory and great. Now, there's certain things that I do like to just say and things that I do always ask people to consider when we're looking at these emerging technologies that even a tech geek like myself has to keep in mind. First, I'm going to use the example of a Bluetooth toaster, okay? Yes, there is such a thing out there as a Bluetooth toaster. It's a toaster that connects to your phone, and it's great. You can put the setting, how dark, how light you want your toast. But at the end of the day, you still have to put that toast in the toaster, right? It doesn't do everything for you. The moral of the story here is just because we can invent something doesn't really mean that we need it or it's going to change our lives. So as we develop these emerging technologies, it's really important to collaborate and evaluate whether or not the technology that's being produced is really going to be beneficial or not. That's why people like myself sit on those advisory boards, and we work with these emerging technology companies to give them feedback from the trenches, from the front lines. So as somebody who has cared for over the years, cared for people with Parkinson's, it's my job to give feedback to these emerging technology companies and let them know that, yeah, you're brilliant, great technology, it's really not going to work. Or maybe here's different ways for you to take a look at it and tweak it so that it become more useful to those of us out there in the real world. That's why I use the example of the Bluetooth toaster. Now, the other thing is, things to consider is patients are often steered away from innovations. And this is just part of ongoing education. You know, even though here we are in 2021, we still live in a society where many, many people are tech averse, right? If it's not simple, if it's not easy, or if they just don't know enough about it, they stay away from tech. And we see this quite a bit in medical providers and others who provide care for those with Parkinson's. So too often we see that patients are steered away from these technologies that could really benefit them, their lives, or maybe research that's being done. So one of the things that we have to continue to do is to continue to educate. As these technologies become more prevalent, and we talked a little bit earlier about the number of studies that are growing exponentially each year around technologies and how they're going to impact those with Parkinson's. Combined with that, we have to continue to educate our providers on these technologies and the benefits of these technologies. So again, we want to make sure that we're not unnecessarily steering away our patients and those with Parkinson's from these amazing innovations. The other thing is equal partnerships. You know, one of the things that we do is we have this data, but most of the time we don't share it with and discuss it with the user. That has been one of the complaints as people who've participated in these various studies or use these devices, too many times they feel left out. And so one of the things that we've got to remember as providers, those of us who are on this presentation who are providers of care, or those who are doing research, is we've got to remember that this is an equal partnership. We've got to include the Parkinson's patients, their caregivers, their spouses, their kids, their loved ones, the people who care for them. This has to be an equal partnership. They've got to have a stake in this because, again, the more they're involved, the better this technology can become. This has to be an equal partnership. And finally, the last thing is humans are greater than technology. Now, I stole that a little bit from Silverado. One of our core operating philosophies is love is greater than fear. Well, here, what I'm saying is humans are greater than technology. At the end of the day, technology is never going to replace the human experience. We can't be so enthralled and so enamored by the technology that we forget about the human that is trying to serve. And that is something that at every event that I am a judge of, every company that I mentor or advise, I always let them know, don't lose sight of what this technology is ultimately there to do. It's there to be a tool to improve the quality of life for that person who is impacted by Parkinson's. Okay, so those are just some of the things that I ask everybody to consider. And again, I want to just thank you so much for listening to my presentation today. Again, it's a different world. It's different trying to speak to a camera rather than trying to speak to an audience, which is something that I'm way more comfortable with. Again, my name is Keith Siadan. I'm with Silverado Memory Care Communities. We have two communities in the Northwest. One is our Bellevue community, and the information is on your screen right now, and also our Silverado Bellingham community. My email address is on the screen, and if there's any areas that I can assist with, if I can elaborate any further, because again, there's only so much that I can do in a short presentation like this, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. And if you'd like more information about Silverado, our web address is there on your screens as well. So again, I want to thank the Northwest Parkinson's Foundation for allowing me to present to you today. I thank them for all the amazing work that they do throughout the Northwest. And again, thank you so much for your time and for your attention today. And I really hope that if you have any questions or if I can help in any way, that you don't hesitate to reach out to me. So thank you so much, and appreciate your attention today.